Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome to the latest Lead, Grow, Deepen, the Diversity Series. I am your hostess with the mostest, Shannon Carroll Washington. And yes, if you've ever watched this diversity series, I've had more hair in the past, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I definitely want to get into this and kick this off. We have a great panel of creative women in culinary for today. We're going to be talking about how to get started. And I think it's very fitting as we're ending this year that when we start 2022, if there is something on your heart that you want to start, we're hoping that we can encourage you. So if you have never been to a Lead, Grow, Deepen series, let me step back. Let me make sure this is big for you guys to see it, okay? If you've never been to a Lead, Grow, Deepen diversity series, it's all about leading with inclusion, growing diverse representation, and deepening our partnerships through diversity, equity, inclusion. Today's guests, we have Serafina, LoGiacco, and Chef Jennifer Milsap. We're going to be talking about, like I said, confidence and getting started. Before I bring them in, let me just share with you some quick bios about them. Serafina has a background working with people and brands to tell stories. She brings a sense of vibrancy and new perspective to each project that she approaches, including her company, Capisce Market. It's a line of artisan and thoughtfully sourced products that emphasize local, organic, and regenerative practices. Jen is a private chef that has made her name as the Fig Princess. She has cooks for people including NBA athletes and high-profile clients. Her career has spanned in restaurants and academic settings. Her love of cooking is led first by her love of eating. She grew up on her great-grandfather's dairy farm in Chino, California, and as a mom, a cancer survivor, and a California native, she has a deep desire to provide nourishment for her clients' specific needs while staying in tune with the bounty of the season. So, without further ado, you guys, I want to bring in our guests, Serafina and Jen. Hello, ladies. How are you? Hold on, let me unmute you so everybody can hear you because I forgot I left you on mute. My bad. Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Good morning on the West Coast. Yes.
Yeah.
It looks like we have some people already in saying hello to you guys on the chat. And so just a little housekeeping before we get started talking. The audience is here. They are listening to us and they are going to be able to chime in on the chat. Look at this. Christine is excited to hear about everybody on this panel. So if you are in the audience, look over there I think it's to your left or to your right. There is a live chat. Chime in. If you like something, if you hear something on this and you like it, go ahead and put a 1 in the chat. That to me says applause. If you have questions, go ahead and ask us as we go. This is really just a casual conversation talking about how to get started. And, before I jump in with the guests, I want to make sure that if this is your first time watching a diversity series, just know that it started out of a need for wanting to really enhance women in culinary. That's where this started. And we want to make sure that not only is opportunity encouragement a part of this series, we want to make sure that we're shedding a light on some of the systematic things that may or may not hold women back. One thing that we've talked in previous diversity series was that when women in culinary start in the kitchen, let's say entry level, it's like 50-50 men to women ratio, right? But then as we go into leadership, it dwindles and it gets smaller and smaller. And by the time we get into top leadership, it's like 1 in 5 women are bosses. Like that to me is crazy. How do you go from 50% to like less than 20%? And so we've talked about a lot of things of the reasons why. And one of the things I think that stuck out to me was that kind of confidence of taking that next step, that leap, and thinking, okay, am I qualified? Am I not? Like, what's going on? Like, I've struggled with that. I mean, if you guys have ever struggled with thinking, ooh, am I good enough? Will they like me? Like, will I fit in? Put a 1 in the chat right now. Okay. If we are not alone here, if I can go ahead and put a 1 in the chat, but that's what we're talking about today. So without further ado, let's talk to our illustrious panel here. Jen, I'm going to start with you. We're talking about getting started. And so how did you get your start? How did you become the Fig Princess?
Well, I was laid off from my job in 2009.
That's a good reason.
Right? So I used to work in higher education, and then I moved to training and development for a large commercial general contractor. And when the market crashed, I was like, oh, well, now's the time to go back to school. I'd always wanted to go to culinary school, and just sort of more of a hobby. But it was something I always wanted to do. And I thought, well, people aren't hiring right now. It's time to go back to school. So I thought, time to follow my passion, kind of follow my dream. So I went to culinary school, and I was 30 at the time. So I would like to just give everyone some inspiration that I was a little bit older when I made that choice. And I wish I would have realized earlier in my life that that's what I wanted to do, so that I did have a little bit earlier of a start, but it's not how that worked out for me. So I went to culinary school, and then I really just started working in restaurants all around Sacramento. And then when I decided to finally leave the restaurant, I was pregnant, and I was at home with my daughter. Well, and then fast forward, I was pregnant, and then months later, I was at home with my daughter, and I just got a phone call one day that someone was looking for a private chef, and would I be interested? And it happened to be an NBA player. And that is kind of what led me on the trajectory of being a private chef and kind of starting my own business. It was something that I'd always wanted to do, but this person sort of didn't give me a choice. She kind of gave me this phone call, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity. It was just something that I had to say yes to. Otherwise, probably my own fears, had been holding me back for a long time, if I'm being really honest. So it was really amazing that it was just kind of that push that I needed. And so I've been doing that now for the last about 4 years.
Nice. All right, Serafina, you have Capisce Market. Like, I know in some of our pre-interviews you talked about, sometimes I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, I'm sure other people have probably felt that too. Like, you started Capisce during the pandemic, right? Like at a time where, oh, this is scary. Like, what was going through your head when you did that?
Yeah, well, I actually started, I don't know, maybe a little bit less than a year before, maybe 6 or 7 months before the pandemic. And I was managing the e-commerce website for a store called General Store. And there I kind of had experience creating websites and, doing all this back-end work. And at the time I was making granola, and my coworker there was like, this is so good. We need to sell it here. You should tell, our boss. And, she was like, yeah, we'll definitely sell it. And I was like, well, okay, sure. I guess I'll start making this. And, so I had the experience under my belt of creating the website. And so it all kind of came together in this organic way. And I was like, if they'll sell it, I guess I'll do it. And then it just kind of bloomed from there. And I've always had the idea of beginning a store in my head. It's been always percolating, but it's kind of like, how's that going to happen? How will it work out? What will be the first step? And this just felt like, okay, well, here's something that I can do to start it. And from there, I just I expanded my offerings really like during the pandemic. So I started with granola and then it expanded into gluten-free sourdough, which is something I started a little bit before the pandemic as well. Um, and biscotti and crackers. And I just kind of kept evolving. And I don't have a actual background in culinary. So I don't have, like the proper teachings of that. It's all just been home teachings. And I think the imposter syndrome is definitely, or, was there of like, oh, well, I'm not classically trained in this, but it's turning out delicious. I love it. And I think it's resonating with people. So kind of had to get over that hump of am I like okay to be doing this? But
no, I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure every person that has heard this and felt this on this call, like you can nod, put a 1 in the chat. And if you're watching this on replay and you have felt the same thing, put a 1 in the chat. There are people who work in our units, in our kitchens, and they don't have a proper culinary background. They didn't go to culinary school. And you're like, can I do this? Can I still pursue a career in this? And I like to tell people there is more than one way to get downtown. And, if you have a passion, there is one thing. I think one of our last guests, I think Chef Dama, there's a few guests back, and he said, no matter what, the one thing people can't take from you is your food. If it tastes good, it tastes good. It doesn't matter how you learned how to do it. If you're doing it, you're doing it. And I'm looking at the ones in the chat right now. Like, you are not alone. And I think these are the conversations that we don't really have on a normal basis. It's like, oh, I don't want to tell anybody that I'm feeling this way. But I think there is kind of a sense of like strength when we can come together, when we network with each other and say, hey, we're going to do this. And so you mentioned something, Serafina, it's kind of near and dear to my heart. Bread. It's definitely my favorite food. If anybody's ever asked me, like, what's your favorite food? Fresh baked bread. I could live off that the rest of my life. Like, I really, truly could. And so, I mean, yeah, we couldn't have these diversity series. I mean, yes, we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion without talking about food. Like, we're rooted in culinary. And so I definitely want to switch gears. We'll get back to talking about Capisce and the Fig Princess, but I definitely want to switch gears and talk about food. And selfishly, we're going to start with you, Serafina, and sourdough, because we're talking about getting started. And I thought it was really cool that sourdough, and I have to be honest, I was I don't want to say ignorant, but I really didn't know how bread got started until the pandemic started and everybody was like, I need to make this. And so I was on that bandwagon, but I never like attempted. Like, I could make a yeast roll, but I had no idea what a starter was. And I'm sure other people may have questions. Can you explain for those on the call what a starter is? Because you start your breads with a starter, correct?
Yeah. It's funny because I actually was kind of confused before I started as well, since I didn't have that culinary background. And I've only worked with gluten-free, so I can't speak for, regular wheat sourdough. I use a brown rice flour. So essentially a starter is just flour and water that ferments at room temperature. And it bubbles and it has like its own life, and it's literally a living creature of yours. I have named mine. It's like become a part of my household. Yeah, so essentially you just have a certain ratio of flour and water for your hydration of the starter. It kind of creates a different crumb, and you keep adding every day, whatever your ratio is, and you leave it at room temp, and it just starts to ferment, and it starts to grow bubbles, and it starts to, just grow in size. And yeah, it usually takes about a week for you to be able to start using it from the starting point. And it just kind of gets better with age. So in the beginning, it's a little bit weaker, and then it starts to, age gracefully. And then when you make your bread, you use a little bit of starter, and then you add more flour and more water and your other ingredients. And yeah, so that becomes your bread. And then when you take some out, you always have to feed your starter. So that's what people talk about when they say feeding your starter. I keep mine in the fridge because I don't bake every day. But yeah, that's basically the the short twist of it.
I have a question for you, Serafina. But first, I want to bring up what Aaron says. Aaron said, yes to this. We have an 8-year-old starter in our house named Mavis, and she has her own personality for sure.
Yeah.
My question to you, Serafina, is what is the name of your starter? You left us hanging.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a he. His name is Moishi. I was watching that Marvelous Miss Maisel. So this was like that kind of days when I like started my starter. And I think the grandfather, one of the characters' names was Moishi, and I just thought the name was so great. And I think it's Moses in like Hebrew or something.
Yes. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes. All about the sourdough starter. And I'm intrigued about the gluten-free aspect of it, because who knows, I might have something. I break out in hives every once in a while, and I eat a lot of bread. So maybe there's something to that. I don't know. I'll have to hit you up about the different gluten-free options. So moving on to Jen, when we talk about food, we got another one. Name is Betty, about a year old. Hey, another Aaron. Oh, look at that. Like everybody's sharing their starter names. I love this. Right? Christine loves it too. She's like, oh, I love that. You guys keep chiming in the chat. You're a part of this conversation as well. And if you're watching on replay, put your stuff in the comments, because we still read that and we see it and we still want to engage with you. All right, Jen, in our pre-interviews, we talked about getting started. And of course, I think I'm just going to read what it says in here, starting with you. Because you're like, aside from the food, when you get into the hustle and bustle of everything, like you have to be cognizant of like, don't forget about yourself. And you're like, it starts with you. And I was like, how about breakfast? Like, what is it? And I was, okay, you guys, I have been internet stalking the both of them, and I'm looking at these like breakfast pictures from Jen's Instagram. I'm like, yes. I was like, filet for breakfast. Can I have some?
Steak and eggs. That's a steak and eggs breakfast right there.
Yeah, but it's fancy schmancy. Yes. So when you think of breakfast and starting your day right and starting with you, what is that recipe? What's that go-to recipe for you?
You know, you're putting me on the spot because I'm really bad about eating breakfast, if I'm being totally honest with you. I personally am terrible about eating breakfast, but I'm trying to get my daughter to not be terrible about eating breakfast because I know how important it is. And so for me, if I'm being really honest, and I want to, let's hashtag end the stigma. For me, it's important that my breakfast is I take my my antidepressant, my vitamin D, my probiotic, and then I grab a kombucha. That's usually what I have in the morning because I don't know, for some reason I'm not hungry when I first wake up. So that's what I do personally. But for my daughter, one of her favorite go-to breakfasts that actually my grandma used to make for me when I was young is, we call it cheesy eggs and rice. And it is leftover white rice. And I start it in a pan with a little bit of butter, scrambled it. And then saute the rice till it's warm, not hard anymore. You know, when cold rice is cold, it like sticks together. So you want to get it all like warm in the pan. And then you're going to add scrambled eggs and you cook it just until it's not runny anymore. Don't forget the salt, okay? Because it's nothing tastes good without salt is cooking 101. So make sure you season it well. Cook it just till it's done, not runny anymore. And then we top it with a little bit of cheese. And it's just like the most simple, amazing breakfast, cheesy eggs and rice. It's still, as an adult, like she's not eating hers. I'm like, okay, well, that ends up being my breakfast is my child's leftovers. Probably lots of moms out there can relate to that. Yeah. So by the time she's done eating, I might be hungry and ready to eat. So still one of my favorite things. You can also wrap it in a tortilla is one of my favorite things to do. Sometimes I'll make a batch of it and like serve her, and then I'll have some left over and I'll just like wrap it in a burrito. So like I have a breakfast burrito ready to go. Little hot sauce on that thing. You're good to go. So yeah, so those are some of my breakfast ideas, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned something just now, like this is a dish that your grandmother made for you, and now you're making it for your daughter. Like, to me, like I get all the feels. I get all the feels when I have these conversations with you ladies, because it's like we're networking, we're women, we're raw, we got this, but it like being able to pass it down from generation to generation. I mean, Serafina, I looked at your website and I see like the old family photos that are on there and just like the generational things that those traditions that are passed. And Jen, do you feel like your inspiration in your food really does stem from the things that were instilled in you by your grandmother?
Yeah, it took me a long time to really figure that out. Actually, I didn't connect with that initially when I was starting out. It's like I've always loved food. I've always had this kind of idea of like a restaurant in the back of my head. And again, I love to eat. I'm led first by being an eater. But it took me a while to finally connect. I think being American, being, born here, being white, it took me until I was probably 26 to really connect my culture with food. I feel like viewing other cultures, it's really, really easy to connect the foods that they eat and maybe where they're from. And it's such a big part of like family gatherings and I mean, not, it is with us too, but I guess I didn't see the connection of where my foods came from, and how that they were really connected to like growing up and connected to my family. And then when I was like 26, I actually took a trip to Europe, to Czech and German. And so we went there and it was like, I had these aha moments where I was like, oh my gosh, the people look like me, like they're fair skinned and they have dark hair and long pointy noses. And some of the foods that I grew up eating are here, like carrot and raisin salad and just like meat and potatoes and certain things that I realized, wow, like my food does have a connection to where I'm from. And so for me, that took me a while to like just have that aha moment. But yeah, it's really cool. And it's really cool to see Gracie just like learn from us and be interested in food and cook in like her little kitchen. This is probably a couple years ago, she's 5 now, but when she was even, I would say probably like 2, maybe going on 3, she would like set up her table and she would put out multiple plates, like, cause she's seen her dad and I like plating food for clients or for, whatever. And she's like plating food. So it's just, yeah, it is really cool, the generational thing and to be able to pass it on. And still to this day, when I eat cheesy eggs and rice, it's like the flavor, like it's nostalgic to me still. Like it's like, just ingrained into my memory, that flavor. And
yeah, for sure. I mean, Serafina, we're going to get into sort of the cultural connections with Capisce. I mean, you can't even not think of the name and think of Italian family when you hear Capisce. So we'll get into that in a second. But before we get into the market and talk more about the Fig Princess, I have a question for you guys. Let me bring it up onto the screen for everybody to see. I wish someone had told me. So it's one thing to get started. It's another thing while you're beginning to start something and you're like, oh my gosh, am I doing this right? Having some sort of mentorship or something that sometimes seems to be lacking, when we talk about like women and mentorship and being able to support each other or allyship. It's what are those things that you wish, for somebody on this call that's either watching it live or on replay. Again, in the replay, you guys put in the comments, watching live, put your questions in the chat. What do you wish somebody would have told you or something you would have known or like just said to yourself to just kind of like calm yourself down when you got started? Serafina, I want to start with you. Is there one thing that, maybe multiple things? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me personally, I got really hung up on like the details of getting started, like the just getting like the cottage food license and the all the business side of it that was really foreign to me and still is. And when those things came up, I just kind of froze. I was like, I don't want to do it. I can handle the creative, I can handle the recipes, I can handle all of that. And then for those things, it was like a big block and it felt like very intimidating. So it was like, where do you start? There's no linear line. You can't just go online and be like, okay, how do I do this? It's like, it's different for every county, for every state, to start a business. And I think it's just so much easier than it feels in your head. It's like, just do it. Just freaking call the company, like they're helpful. Just call the county, just be like, okay, how do I get this license? What do I need? And then that leads you to the next step. And it takes way quicker. It's way easier than you think. And it's just like, don't get hung up. Just start whatever is, feeling like a block in your head. It's usually easier than you imagine.
So you guys heard
So
it here
true.
first.
Yeah.
Make the call.
Make the
We're
call.
so kind of like, I got to search it online. I don't know what to do. Pick up the phone. Call somebody. There's resources out there. Like, ask the questions, and you're going to find answers. If you don't find it there, you'll find it somewhere else. So make the call. That's great. I'm writing that down. Jen, how about you?
Well, for me, again, I got started because someone gave me a little push. And like I said, I couldn't say no. So I think, and actually, ironically, so I shared a quote with you, Shannon. I don't know if you want to put it up on the screen. The person actually who called me and gave me this amazing referral to this client was someone who, in theory, was actually less qualified than me to be doing what she was doing, but she's just amazing. And she just steps outside and just figures stuff out and just does it. And so I think this is the thing for me. And it's just like, just remember a lot of what Serafina was saying, we don't all know. I think there's this belief that people who are doing it or have it all figured out and it's perfect or this or that. And it's really, we're all just figuring it out. And so, just don't be afraid. And I think it's something you have to remind yourself. It's not something you can tell yourself one time, like, oh, I wish I would have known to live outside my fear or whatever, step out. It's like, you just have to remind yourself of that all the time. It's okay to do it afraid, do it scared.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, there are people less qualified than you doing things you want to do simply because they decide to believe in themselves.
So true.
I mean, I have had conversations with a lot of women on this diversity series, and, we've held panels and talks and discussions. And there was one book that we were reading, and we kind of did like a book club about, here are the mistakes that women can make that hold them back in the workplace. And one of them was thinking that you had to be completely qualified to move up to the next level. And for our allies on this call, the guys on this call watching, I don't think they have that sort of inhibitions. I feel like women, we kind of hold ourselves back and we're like, oh, I got to have every single check mark on all the job requirements before I can move into it. Yeah. But a male in the same position would be like, you know what? No, I'm going for it. And I don't know if it's something ingrained in us where we're like, no, we're not going to mess up. We're going to make sure we have everything in place to do it. But I don't know why we don't give ourselves kind of a little bit of grace and say, hey, I can learn this once I'm there. We always feel like we have to have it all figured out. And I will say this, in one of the conversations we had, and I think it was in that book, and it said, you can sit there and try to master it and master the position that you're in now, and then try to master the next position. But what will end up happening is the people that have control to bring you to that next level probably won't, because you're so good at what you're doing right now. And you kind of back yourself into this hole where you're like, I'm not moving and this is it. And that's really not where we want to end up. So I'm going to switch gears. We're going to talk a lot more about the Fig Princess and Capisce Market. I want to make sure if you are watching, audience, and you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat now, because we're going to get to Q&A in just a sec. But let's get deeper into Capisce. Starting off, tell us about it. Tell us what the things are. How do people find you? What can they get, Serafina?
Yeah. So right now, all the gluten-free sourdough that I bake, I am not shipping. I'm trying to figure out a way that I can ship that and it, remains fresh, but bread is best when it's fresh, especially gluten-free. So that right now is just local. So if you're passing through Santa Barbara, it's available. Or LA, sometimes I do drop-offs as well. But everything else I do ship, which includes granola and gluten-free crackers and biscotti. And everything that I use with flour is all milled. So I have a miller at home. So all my grains, I do my own milling. Wow. Yeah, which seemed like a big endeavor, and it kind of still feels that way, but it's really nice. I think it incorporates a different taste and flavor. And to me, sourcing is so important. And I didn't mention this earlier, but the reason, when I started Capisce as well was why I started making granola was just that I couldn't find one that didn't have a ton of like awful oil. Like I didn't want to use canola oil. And I didn't want it to be super sweet. Like they just feel like desserts and treat like cookies. And I wanted it to feel nourishing, but still like craveable and good. And that's what I try to do with all of my products. So, lightly sweetened and just like really thoughtful sourcing on, is it local? What are their practices? Like, what's the company like? Where is it from? Does it have to travel far? Like taking all of the environmental thoughts for each product and each ingredient separately is like super important to what I do. And, and then going back to kind of like the cheesy eggs and rice thing, like the nostalgic tastes are also just so important to me. Like my dad was from Italy, and so we grew up just with a very heavy influence of Italian food, and food is just like the most important thing in my family in general. So always finding ways to kind of create those Italian flavors and dishes that I grew up with, but in a slightly more healthy, nourishing, and gluten-free way, because gluten doesn't sit well with me, unfortunately. And my husband is celiac, so it's even more important that we kind of keep it, without the gluten. And it's amazing what you can do. Or, I just feel like gluten-free used to have such a bad rap, but now there's just so many options, and it really just can taste amazing. And it's very fun to explore that.
I mean, you are literally starting from scratch, like all the way. And Christine has had the pleasure of trying your granola, like milling your own wheat, like milling your own grains.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a process, but I think it pays off. And yeah.
I have a children's book by Eric Carle. It's in a series, and it's about I think it's something about making the pancake, and the mom sends the boy out to like go to the miller to get the wheat and whatever. And I'm like, you're doing it here. Like, what? This is just in a children's book. Like, are you serious? That's amazing.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. And with gluten-free too, you're using all different types of flour. So like, for instance, like a lot of my breads have 3 different flours usually. Like I use a mixture of oat and teff and brown rice for the starter and millet. So all these things are very nourishing, but they all have different flavor notes as well.
I'm excited about the time when you figure out how to ship it to Atlanta for me. Like you said, the magic word, millet. That was like one thing I was trying to incorporate in my diet when I was nursing my son. Like it was like the thing that was like, yep, I am able to produce food for my child because I'm eating millet. So I'm like, ooh, hold on. You have crackers with millet. Maybe I will eat some.
Yes.
Yes, for sure. Erica is on the bandwagon too. She has tried them and they are amazing.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Erica.
All right, moving on to the Fig Princess. I was like going through the gram and all of the dishes and all of the things. Like I have been super hungry reading these menus. Like I don't know about you guys on the call, but I enjoy reading menus. And like the Fig Princess, I'm like, yes.
Story of my life. When I'm writing the menus, I'm like, or looking for inspiration every night and laying in, bed or doing whatever I'm doing, brainstorming. And I'm like, I just want to eat all the time because that's all I think about is good food.
Yes. So tell us about the Fig Princess. Like, what do you do? I know you are a private chef, but you also do private events. You cater. Yeah. I saw like you did a really cute like anniversary for a couple during COVID times. Like, tell me about all of those things.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm really just kind of started out. Like I said, I got a push from a friend to be a private chef for a full-time client. I was really lucky to have that. I mean, most people can't have a full-time private chef, but I did that for a while. And then, as I've kind of just moved through, just started, it's really kind of referral only. I mean, I do my own, stuff on Instagram, but in terms of posting and like sharing certain things, but I just do private dinners, private events, people just referrals, word of mouth. People hear about me or have looked at my page. And I love just making special occasions special for people with food. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do, just for hire. A lot of weekend, that when you work in food and in culinary that you're signing up to give a lot of nights and weekends and special holidays off, away. You're signing up to kind of forever be working those. But I just love helping people enjoy food, and I love making it beautiful. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I am enjoying it because I'm like taking some like plating ideas from all of your stuff. That ceviche,
Yeah.
ooh,
Yeah, I
I'm
started out in
loving
fine dining, mostly, and just so I try to bring that to, our events too, is that I can do obviously a lot of home cooking and comfort food, and some things are super rustic, but when someone's looking to have like a really special event, I would say that plated dinners, coursed out plated dinners are really what I love to do for people. So.
Awesome. All right, audience, if you have questions, we are about to wrap up. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat now. And if you're watching on replay, put the questions down in the comments. I can make sure to route them to these ladies after the fact. Now, as we wrap up, elephant in the room. I don't think I've addressed the audience. Yes, I shaved my head. Long story short, a friend of mine's going through chemo. I was like, you know what? You're not going to be bald by yourself. So that's where that is. But I also looked at it when I was like prepping for this event. I was like, you have to start somewhere, right? And so that was one of the main things that my hair has always been kind of this place where I can express myself and start something new. And I feel like 2022 is going to be a year of like, hey, we figured out this junk drawer. We dumped it out in 2021, right? And now we're really like taking the things that like, yes, this is going to live on and we're going to keep doing. And so my hair is kind of like a reflection of that. So I'm excited about the start, not only of my hair growing back, but like what this is going to be, like my career, what I'm doing in my family, everything. Thanks, guys. They're like commenting. They like it, guys. They really like it.
Awesome.
Thank you. And you guys, if you've watched the other diversity series events, you notice that my background is different. I finally finished. I have an office. I'm out of my closet, guys. Like, this is great, right? New beginnings, starting fresh, all of that. Now, I say all that to say I was looking for something to go on this wall behind me, like a decal or something. And I came across this really cool quote, guys. And I mean, I don't know if it's serendipity or what. Like, this is what was on a decal. It's like, here we go. I'm going to read this in my professional voice. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. Like, I'm one of those people that kind of like will sit and like dwell on the past and be like, oh my gosh, how could I do this wrong and this and that and this? But this to me, it's like, yeah, I can't go back and change it, but I can start right here. Where am I now? And look at where I am now and where I want to go. And you can still get there. And it's just like, you just have to start. Like I bring this up because I feel like you guys have such a great perspective. Like Serafina, when you see this, what does it make you think?
It makes me think that it doesn't have to be perfect. Like for me personally, for Capisce, everything I've put out, it was not in its most perfect form when I first put it out. But I think just starting is like, like you've said throughout this talk, like it's just the most important step. So like, all of my recipes, they all have evolved. And I think with any business and with anything in life, like you have to evolve, and staying stagnant is never good for anything. So I think just starting fresh and, evolving with each moment and each year and each month, and always checking in like, okay, where do I want to go now? And what's next? And, never just keeping with the same thing, because that's boring for you and you don't really grow. So
Sure.
I think just never thinking that it has to be perfect, and just kind of beginning, always fresh.
Yeah. Jen, what about you? What do you think when you read this?
For me, it's you can't go back and change the beginning. So you're going to make mistakes and you're going to fail even. I mean, as much as we all say like, oh, failure is part of the process. I mean, it's really hard to actually accept that, but it's going to happen and you're going to make all kinds of mistakes, and it's fine. It's okay. Just keep going. You're going to learn from it. I mean, if I'm going to be totally honest, I'll share another point. I just recently lost a client, and kind of a bummer, right? But I did what I felt like I had to do in terms of how I felt like I should handle it. And, I can't go back and change it, but we're just going to keep pushing forward. And I think as long as you feel like you're working and moving in your authenticity and you are, doing the right thing for you, you just got to keep moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. Bayside Cafe, I always love your comments on here. If you never fail, you do not grow. I mean, that's so true. So true. And Ken says, it's a powerful statement. It's never too late to change direction. I mean, I went to film school. How am I sitting here talking about food? Like, it's never too late. Yes. So
I agree in social work. I'm not
right. Like we all come from all these different places, but guess what? We're where we're supposed to be, and we're moving in the right direction as long as we believe in ourselves and we keep going. And that's what we can do. All right. I don't see any questions coming through, but Pio says, "Well said, chef." Hi, Pio. How you doing? Yes. Yes. So I'm gonna wrap up. I know that these ladies have so much going on, and you can peep what they're doing on their Instagram. Go back. Here are their handles so that you see it: capisce.market and fig _fig_princess. You guys have that. You can follow them there. I am Shannon Carroll Washington. I am with my guest, Chef Jennifer Milsap and Serafina LoGiacco. And this was the latest diversity series talking about getting started. And I just want to thank the audience for watching and chatting with us. I want to thank my panel. You guys, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for being candid and transparent and just sharing your life with us for these 45 minutes. I truly appreciate it. So I'm going to wrap this up. If you guys are watching on the audience and you have suggestions for next guest or topics you want to talk about, hit me up on my email, shannon.washington@guggenheimer.com. And I'll leave it here. This has been the latest diversity series, Lead, Grow, Deepen. All right, guys, we'll see you later. Have a great one.
you.
Thank you.
And you can